6. The walls tremble. The lions return.
The night that followed the first breach was a silence no one could trust. Kazanchis did not sleep. She never had. But now the whispers carried through her alleys were different. They were not drunken songs from Tej Biets or the laughter of gamblers by candlelight. They were whispers of fear and whispers of resolve. At the southern barricade, Gong sat cross-legged, sharpening the edge of his father's rusted machete. Chombi leaned against the wall beside him, tossing pebbles at a dented oil drum. His jaw sat hard. "Brother," Chombi muttered, "do you hear it? The ground. It's moving." Gong paused. He pressed his palm to the soil. Faintly, deep like the growl of an ancient beast, he felt it too. The rumble of trucks, armored metal beasts that belonged to the new occupiers. "They are regrouping," he said. "They will try again at dawn." His voice did not shake. Chombi spat.
"Let them. Kazanchis is not for sale. Not for them. Not for any king or minister who has forsaken her children."
Nearby, Seraphiel was gathering the young ones, Ketchel, Iwexa, and Munini, drilling them not with swords, but with courage.
"When the fire comes, you don't run from it,"
he told them, his scarred face catching the torchlight.
"You run through it. Fire cannot burn a spirit already aflame."
Munini raised his hand nervously.
"But, Seraphiel, what if we die?"
Seraphiel smiled softly, bending to the boy's height.
"Then we do not die as beggars. We die as Kazanchisians, and Kazanchis' names are never erased. Do you hear me? Never!"
The children nodded. Tears welled, but stood straighter. At the northern barricade, the women prepared like priestesses before a great ritual. Nardi, Etiati, Etata, Eyaya, Enanayi, Enanua, Nunusha, Bichu, Bachu, and Wenua mixed ragged bandages with holy water taken from Gabriel Church. Milo and Kabtish sharpened spears in silence. Meazu hummed a war song her grandmother sang against the Italians.
"Do you think Gong can hold them?"
Bichu asked, her hands trembling as she wrapped a strip of cloth around her arm like armor. Yaya's voice was steady.
"He can. But the question is, can we hold ourselves?"
The women looked at one another, their fear turning into something heavier. Duty. Before dawn, the ground thundered louder. Engines roared. Floodlights pierced the dark. The metal beasts came, their bellies filled with soldiers who thought themselves gods. Gong rose, his machete gleaming with the edge of both rust and righteousness. Chombi stood beside him, carrying a spiked club forged from broken rebar.
"This is it, brother."
"This is not it," corrected him Gong, his eyes blazing. "This is still only the beginning." The clash came like a storm breaking against a cliff. Bullets sprayed. More of the first Kazanchisians fell, but the barricades of wood, tin, and stone held longer than the occupiers expected. Gong leapt into the fray like a shadow, cutting down the first soldier who tried to scale the wall. Chombi swung his club, sending helmets flying, teeth scattering like gravel. Surafel charged from the front, his blade glinting like fire against the dark sky, and behind him the men and women of Kazanchis roared with a voice that shook the city's very stones. The Prosperity Party lines cracked at the first collision. Shields splintered, rifles fell, and the enemy broke rank under the ferocity of the attack. Surafel drove them down, step by step, until they stumbled all the way toward Boli, far from Uriel's sacred ground, where they were joined by heroic youth of surrounding areas like Santayada, Doyo, Dochila, Bari, Mel, Hodiyi, Sila, Tari, Abuyi, Abu, Abiti, Beba, and more. And the Kazanchisians only grew stronger and stronger, so he hurled back the St. Uriel road upwards north, to St. Gabriel and Beata Lamaria monasteries, where Menelik II slept, saw Kazanchis held strong there too, and swifted down west to St. Estefanos Church's area.
The southern wing surged like a storm tide. Abuli's hammers smashing armored trucks into twisted carcasses, Gong sweeping entire platoons aside with his iron fists, Ngishu cutting swaths through the mercenaries imported from neighboring countries. For every shot fired against them, 10 of the enemy fell, overwhelmed by the fire in the eyes of those who fought for their homes, their mothers, their fallen brothers. Above, the Valkyries, Nardi, Meazu, Kabtish, Bichu, Bachu, Mimi, Mama, Nunu, Eyaya, swooped like burning stars. They dropped through the smoke and chaos, lifting whole squads of enemy soldiers into the air, only to cast them down shattered. Their wings shimmered with ash and blood, and their voices were war songs. The South was winning. Victory after victory, the invaders fell back, crying out to commanders who could no longer control them. But while the southern wing raged, the west wing began its own legend. Serafiel, burning with a fire only he carried, led the siege on Haile Selassie I's Golden Jubilee Palace. Through broken gates and over walls, they surged. Bullets struck his chest plate and shattered, his roar drowning out the gunfire as he planted the old imperial banner atop the highest window. The palace was theirs. For the first time in decades, the lion standard of Ethiopia rose above the city, not as symbol, but as living claim. Across the city, another thunder rolled. Alone, defiant, Ainu scaled the walls of Menelik's grand palace. The prosperity troops had fortified it, but they were not ready for the madness in his eyes. One man against hundreds. He cut, he bled, he broke, and still he climbed. Every defender who stood in his way fell to his blade. At last, soaked in sweat and blood, Ainu forced his way into the emperor's chamber, seized the imperial throne, and shouted into the echoing hall, "By Menelik's own stone, Kazanchis has returned!" The north and south wings converged. The city reeled. From Uriel to Gabriel, Estefanos to Kidana Maret, Kazanchis stood free. And then, in the heart of the chaos, the Valkyries of Kazanchis struck their boldest trick. Under cover of fire and smoke, Samira, Nardi, Meazu Yordi, Fantish, and Kabtish swept down, dragging commanders out of their bunkers. Birhani Jela, the Minister of Defense herself, was seized, bound, stripped of her weapons, brought before the gathered Kazanchisian fighters. Generals, colonels, ministers, all lined up under the gaze of those they had once ordered to be homeless and broken. The Kazanchisian warriors looked to their leaders for judgment
The air was thick with the thirst for vengeance. But the Valkyries raised their hands.
We are not beasts!
Milo declared, voice sharp as a blade.
We do not slaughter the bound. Hear this and remember it. You are spared, but you will never return. Step foot again on this soil, and it will be your grave.
The commanders were cast out into the streets. Their common foot soldiers, bewildered and afraid, were released. The message spread across Addis Ababa like lightning. Kazanchis fights with honor, yet even as victory crowned them, a shadow gathered. At the gates of the National Palace, Gong himself came within an arm's reach of Abiy Ahmed Ali, as he tried to flee the wrath of that madness they called Ainu, who, as if he eagerly chased it, and death run from him, stormed a whole palace packed with special forces and the Republican Guard all by himself, and slaughtered all that dare run not or fall. His fist closed around the man's shoulder, but Abichu twisted like the serpent he is, tearing free. Blood ran down his arm, his guards falling like leaves in Gong's path. By miracle, or curse, he slipped away into the night, and from a hidden bunker he placed his calls, first to Washington, then to Rome, then across the oceans to every throne of power. Trump answered. The bitch fascist Prime Minister of Italy answered. And then more. Leaders whose faces were masked by the screen, but whose voices carried the weight of empires. The deal was struck in whispers. By dawn, the skies above Ethiopia filled with the banners of the world. Armies converged from the west and east. Drones darkened the sun. Satellites locked their eyes upon Kazanchis. Every empire, every tyrant, every profiteer of war aligned. Not for justice, not for peace, but for the extermination of the free people who had risen. It was Armageddon in Addis Ababa. And in those first days, the heroes still lived. They would taste victories sweeter than honey before fate called for their blood.